Tying another Carrie Stevens streamer today. This is called the Blue Dragon. Very similar to another streamer of hers I've tied called the Blue Charm. But this video today is going to be a little bit longer than usual because I'm tying this to be framed, and I want to include some little subtle things that you can do to up your game a little bit if you want to tie a fly to be framed and you want to make certain it's turning out just the way you want it. So I'm going to attempt in the description to put some time codes in for the various stages of this fly if you want to jump ahead, but I am warning you ahead of time it's going to be a little bit longer. So if you want to watch the whole thing, by all means, grab your favorite beverage. That is the Blue Dragon, and I'll get started tying. I'm going to start the Blue Dragon with my hook in the vise. This is a Partridge CS15 in a size 2. A little bit on the big side. I'm going to attach my thread just behind the eye of the hook and stop right at the return. This doesn't have a closed eye here, just has a return back to the side. I'm going to stop right there. I'm going to put in a piece of floss right now, and I'll explain why in just a second. This is optional. You don't have to do this if you're, again, it depends whether you're tying this to show or whether you're tying this to throw. I'm tying this more for show, and therefore I want to utilize some techniques that are going to help things turn out just a little bit better. What I'm doing here is I'm tying in some floss. This is just a Danville 4-strand rayon floss in white. Now the body on this is a tinsel body, so I really don't have to use the white thread or the white floss. I don't have to worry about darkening it up, as long as I don't have any gaps in that tinsel when I wrap it in. So I'm going to attach this to the hook shank right on top of the hook shank and start wrapping backwards. I'm using the thread on this is a UTC Wapsi UTC 310 Denier in white, and the reason that I'm using that is because I can flatten this out and it will lay much smoother along the hook shank. Notice I'm keeping this floss so it's right on top of the hook shank. I'll explain what the floss is for in just a moment. Now, as I had mentioned before, this video might end up being a little bit longer because you'll notice that I'm just taking my time much more with what I'm doing. If you're going to be tying a fly like this, or even just a little wet fly, or even a dry fly, and you want it for show, slow down the things you're doing and just take a little bit more time to make certain every thread wrap's going right where you want it. The material is laying on the hook just how you want it. That's probably the biggest key to tying flies that you're going to present or you're going to show versus those that you want to go fishing with. Now, I do have a little bit of some gaps here. I could go back and unwind and cover that up if I wanted to, but as I said, because of the fact that this is a tinsel body on here, that's still smooth enough for the tinsel. I'm not as concerned about it, but it just reminds me that I will slow down a little bit more and make certain that I am getting my thread wraps right where I want them. I've got my thread wraps in, and I've got my material at the end of the body and right at the start of the tip and the tail. I'm going to cut this floss out here. And I'm going to go ahead and remove the floss on this end too. Now, the reason why I tied that floss in right up here is that any little nub that's right here will end up getting covered up with the head. Now I'm ready to tie in the tip. And the tip and the body on this is just a silver tinsel. I'm using a Danville number 12 silver and Mylar tinsel. I'm going to tie this in with the gold side up. And you'll notice that I'm going to pull that tinsel back. I'm bracing the thread on the other side. I'm going to pull that tinsel back so that just the tip is sticking out past that thread wrap. And this is probably one of the most important things also in general fly tying, is thread control is ultimately very, very important. So making certain that, it only takes a wrap or two to hold some materials in while you're doing another step. So just make certain that you're keeping that thread control. Again, if I want to, I can flatten this out, and that will, as you can see, when it was real flat right here, it went in really nice and smooth. This is just going to make certain that that tip and the tinsel body goes in as smooth as possible. Now, I'm going to stop here for a second, just short of that body there, and explain why I tied that floss in. When we're tying our flies that we're going to show and present and or frame, we want to make certain that we're minimizing any bumps of material or thread bumps. That's probably the biggest thing. Now, I've got tinsel tip I'm going to put on here, and then I've got a tinsel body. Problem is, if I go tying in the tail on this, the tail is going to be some Schlappen. I'm going to use some yellow hackle here. If I go tying that in, that I'm going to produce just a small bump on the upper side here. Obviously, if it's a bigger clump for the tail, it's going to be a little bit bigger bump, and I can taper that down just a little bit. But what the floss on top here is my attempt at putting something on top here that is going to match up to the tail material here. So when I wrap this forward, I'll still end up with a nice smooth body. Now, having said that, you could potentially just wrap that in, go up here. You could also put in a double layer for the body tinsel that goes down and then comes back up, if that's easier for you. You could also just tie it with that little bump there. Okay. Keep in mind, it depends on how fastidious you want to get on this. And I'll explain that in just a little bit after we get the wings on. But right now, that's my attempt at trying to minimize that. So that's why I put that in. Now I'm going to go ahead and apply the tinsel tip. And again, I'm wanting to make certain that I'm pressing down on this side here so that that fold right there is nice and flat. But I want to make certain that I just take my time so that each wrap, after wrapping over that first one, each wrap is just right overlapping the previous one just a little bit. But I want to make certain that the angle on each wrap is correct and that I'm not getting any gaps over on this side. Or sometimes if you get too much of an angle or too short of an angle, you're going to get a bump, a kind of a kink in that tinsel. So just take your time with it. If I were tying this just to go fishing with, I'd probably put a layer of head cement underneath it just to reinforce that, in case any fish teeth or anything snap that. But since this is basically going to be framed, I'm just going to go ahead and wrap it in. But you'll notice I'm just taking my time real slow with this, making certain that I am looking all around both sides. Now I'm getting 2 thread wraps, and these are going rearward, each one. They're not on top of each other. They're just going to the back direction. And I will double check. All this is nice and smooth. If I had any gaps, at this point, I could unwrap it. I'm going to leave this in just for a second before I trim it because I only have a couple wraps on it. I'm going to put in the tail. Now, as I mentioned, the tail is just some yellow Schlappen, which is also what I'm going to use for the throat. One thing you want to be careful of when you go to select what feathers you want to use for the tail, you want to take a look at the barbs that you're going to be peeling off. If you look at these right here, these may be long enough, but I've got along here some damaged barbules right in this area here. Now that may or may not affect the overall look of the fly. It may be a factor that would keep you from using that feather, or it may be that's just fine. Again, if it were a fishing fly, I would go ahead and peel that out, and I would use that. It's long enough. It has the color that I want. It doesn't have to be perfect. But I've got another feather here that I'm going to peel off a number of barbs here. Again, it depends on how thick you want the tail to be. I want my tail to go only maybe a quarter of a shank length or so past the tip. Right here, just a little bit past. This will actually end up being just inside the overall wing. I'll see where I'm going to tie that in, and then I'm going to cut off the excess at a little bit of an angle. And then I'm going to tie that in just right on top here where my tinsel's at, and I'm just working that back a couple of wraps. You'll see the thread's nice and flat there. A couple of wraps going backwards just to make certain that's sitting up on top. When I cut that tinsel and wrap the butt ends of that in, it will fill up that space and it should smooth that off pretty good. I get one more wrap just to make certain it's secure. And that wrap also was going backwards, not on top. Now I'm going to tie in the tinsel body. You want to get, for this one, you want to get a nice long piece of tinsel. You don't want to end up coming up short on this. And I will tie this in full length of the body. You can tie this in and leave this long if you want and cut that as you get towards the other end. Or you can do what I did, like I did with the tip. You could pull that back so that the resulting tip of that is just at the end of the body. Now my wraps are all going to start moving forward. Again, keeping in mind, I'm not wrapping anywhere right on top of each other because I want to minimize any kind of a bump. Now I've got a couple wraps here I could put in right there at the end of the tail material and the end of that floss. Kind of fill that in just a little bit, just to smooth that area off. See? So now that floss, and I could have maybe put in a little bit more floss on top, depending on the tail material, but the diameter of the hook shank that has increased on top of the hook shank here because of the tail is now also increased because of the floss. Again, that may not be something to consider depending on, what you're tying this for in terms of giving it away, showing it, as well as I mentioned, when I tie in the wing, I will bring that up again. In other words, you may not even see it in the resulting fly. Now I'm just going to take my time, one wrap in front of the other, flattening out my thread as I go along, and bring my thread all the way back up to the end of the body here so I can wrap the actual tinsel body in. So as you can see, just flattening that thread and being careful, I can bring this all the way up to the end. And I keep everything here nice and smooth, pretty much close to the same diameter back here. I do have a little bit of a bump. However, I don't think that's going to matter in the resulting body. Now I'm going to go ahead and taking my hackle pliers, and I use the hackle pliers because they allow me to get a nice grip on the material and keep a nice even tension on it. If I do it with my fingers, it tends to slip in my fingers a lot, and occasionally will even slip out. But if it does slip at all, the wraps as you're moving will shift, and that's when you get gaps between the wraps of tinsel. So again, I'm just going to take my time here, making certain each wrap is at least right in front of the other one, or just overlapping a little bit. Yeah, see, I've got a little gap right here. So because I'm tying this for framing, I'm going to unwrap this, and I'm going to come back, and I'm going to make certain that I remove that gap. I'm going to do that now while I can. Part of that, I think, is a little bit of a bulge in the tinsel because of the hackle underneath it. Yeah, I've got just the same kind of little bulge right here. If that's the case, then just overlap your materials a little bit more, kind of push that down, and you'll work that out. These don't have to be in a position where each wrap looks nice and uniform in front of the other one. In other words, the little lines that you see between the wraps don't have to be all nice and even to the point where it almost looks like there's a rib or something on it. Now it might be the lighting here, but it looks to me like I've got a little bit of a gap here. Actually, I think that's the lighting. I think that's a reflection off of the silver tinsel. I may be wrong. What I could do at this point is I could unwrap and go back. But I think I'm just going to keep moving forward here and put all of the tinsel in for the body. Just taking my time, getting each wrap in the way I want it. Some people do find these kinds of bodies are easier to do by anchoring it in at the front of the body, putting a layer down and a layer back up. And the reason for that is that if there's any gaps in the top layer of tinsel, you're not going to see the underlying thread because there's tinsel underneath it. So it kind of hides that. Okay, so I have my last wrap in for the end of the body. I'm going to put in one wrap there and another one, and these are kind of working forward. So I'm not adding to the body back there, just to secure that, and then inspect it. You can pinch some of these and scooch some of this around a little bit to possibly move and fill in a little gap between the wraps or a little kink to spot. But that doesn't look too bad. Like I said, a larger size, say a size 10 tinsel will cover that a little bit quicker if you're comfortable with working with that size. Fortunately, the Blue Dragon is a pretty straightforward fly. It has the tip, the tail, and the tinsel body. It has a throat in it, and then it has the wing. There's no belly on this or peacock underwing or anything like that. Now I'm going to change over at this point to my orange thread because it does have a head. It's a black head with an orange band. I'm using a UTC 140 Denier in a burnt orange, simply because I just liked the more muted color of the burnt orange as opposed to a brighter orange. But if that's what you have and that's what you want to use, by all means, go right ahead. Again, keep in mind you want to, while you're working on these things, keep your thread wraps to a minimum so you're not building that up too much. Now I'm going to put the throat in. The throat is just some yellow Schlappen hackle fibers, I should say, barbs, in other words, what they're called. And I've got 3 clumps that I'm going to put in here. These go about halfway down the body. This is pretty straightforward, and if you've watched any of the other videos that I've done on Carrie Stevens streamers, there's really nothing in this step to watch out for other than making certain that your materials are placed right where you want them and you're minimizing your thread wraps. I've got another clump I'm going to put on the side here. I'm going to actually hold these from top to bottom because where those are getting wrapped in is a leveler, flat area. It's not like the round edge of a shank. I'm going to use my thumbnails here just to make certain that it's all right on the side of that. That just keeps this area here nice and level for tying in my wing. And I'm just putting enough hook or thread wraps on there to hold the material in place. I don't have to bind it in right at the moment. The more thread wraps I put in here when I build the head up and get the wing in, it will bind all of that in. Take my last clump here. I'm going to put it over on this side, same length. I'm going to make certain it's right on the side of the hook like that. It hasn't kind of pulled over. I've got 1 barb here. If you want to, I don't think it's a big issue, but this one is kind of sticking up into the wing area. Just going to cull that out, but I don't think that would be a big issue if you left that in. So now we're ready for our wing, and I'm going to clean this area up. Not quite going all the way up to behind the eye here. Staying a little short of that. I'm going to let the black thread kind of fill that in. And this, I'm just smoothing this up where the head's going to be so that I can tie in the wings. Now the wing on the Blue Dragon, as I mentioned before, is similar to the Blue Charm. The Blue Charm is essentially the same fly as this with just a blue wing. It's 2 blue hackles on the left and the right and the jungle cock eye. The Blue Dragon has a gray hackle and then the blue hackle and then a natural grizzly hackle on top of it, then the jungle cock eye. I'm going to tie these in pretty much the same as in other videos that I've shown you. The one thing that I am going to do, because I'm tying this one and a few others to be framed, when I'm going to take a little bit more care in selecting the feathers for my wings and matching those up. So I want to make certain that the tips are matching up even, that they're full along each one, and that they tend to match and look together pretty good. In other words, I don't have, say, a grizzly here that's much narrower, so I've got a lot of blue on both sides of it. I've got the 2 grizzlies match up. They look the same. So does the jungle cock. So it all looks kind of nice and even. Again, that's the one thing you want to do is just make certain that as you're tying, putting all of these together, selecting these and gluing these together and everything, you're just selecting materials that are going to be nice materials for the resulting fly that you're looking for. Holding those in place, these are getting tied up on top of that flat area. This one is going to be tied over on my side of that flat area, as you can see, and the other one will be on the other side. I am pushing this down at the base here just a little bit because I want the resulting feather to go much more horizontal, straight back, as opposed to canted up. Now, I mentioned before, in terms of the bump at the tail and any gaps in the body here, this is where you'll have to decide. They may be a moot point, because when I tie the wings in here, and once this is mounted in a frame and it's presented or whatever, the person may never ever even see that there's a tinsel body on there. Even the yellow tail, depending on, it sticking out and so on, and the yellow throat, a person looking at this when it's on display may not even notice it has the tinsel body. So that's up to you. But these are things to consider. The other thing to consider is also, when you're tying these in, which face are you going to have out? In other words, if this wing is just perfect, but let's just say something happened, the jungle cock split on this side, and I didn't want to display that, but this was a nicer side, then I would probably mount this such that this side was out where people are going to view it. That's if it's in a frame or something. If it's in some sort of a 360-degree display, it can't be helped. But keep that in mind, because sometimes you can get away with maybe a little bit of inferior material, or see, I got one grizzly hackle that's kind of drooping here. You can get away with that a little bit by putting it on the non-visible side. So something else to keep in mind when you're tying these to be framed or to be presented. I'm going to put that one right up next to the other one. I'm going to get 3 or 4 or 5 wraps in to secure it. Then I just want to double check and make certain that my tips are evened up here. Those are all evened up. My ends here are evened up. This, I would like to have this a little bit further down along the more horizontal, like that. Now I'm going to wrap all of this in nice and tight, smoothing this off for the resulting head of the fly. Now, see, normally that would be a good base for me to make the head of the fly here. But I'm going to take it a step further. I'm going to go ahead and flatten my thread. It's part of the reason I use this UTC 140 denier, because I can flatten this. And this is just an added thing that you can do for these because you're going to display them. Notice that flattened thread going on there smooths out that area where the orange band is going to end up being. I'm going to put in my whip finish here, just right off the very end. Don't want to bulk that up. Now, before I cut this, I'm going to show you a little trick. If you have an issue, sometimes, I think I've had some videos where this has happened to me, may happen to you sometimes, but if I say went to cut this right now, if that was under tension, the end of that could pop out from under the thread wraps for that whip finish. You end up with a little kind of curly Q on the end. If you want to try and prevent that, what you can do is go ahead and put some head cement on this. That head cement's going to soak down in there. Just give it a minute, couple minutes to soak in there and start to set up. I'm going to come back in a couple minutes and we can cut that off, and I am less concerned about that thread popping out from underneath those wraps. So it's been a couple minutes. My head cement's pretty much set up, so I can take the edge of my scissors and just tap it along at the base of that thread just to pop that thread off. Now, I'm going to take my black, which is a Danville 6-aught black, and I'm going to make the 2 black bands in the head. This is very similar to other videos that I've done with these Carrie Stevens flies. You've probably maybe have seen some. You just start, I start with the rear band, get a few wraps in to anchor down that tag end of thread, and I'll cut that. The only thing here is, because you are going to show this, you just want to take a little bit of care of thread placements so that you're not bulking any of this up. You want to keep it just kind of nice and flat. Make certain you're getting everything covered all the way from the back here forward. And I'm going to put in, no, I think that's just about right. So I'm going to flatten my thread here. Again, this does the same thing. It just, as I wrap this in, do a whip finish here, just makes it a little bit smoother. And I'm actually going to do a whip finish by hand here, because it's going to be easier for me to control the placement of the thread with my fingers than it is the whip finish tool. If I had a whip finish tool that was a little bit wider throat on it, I could get this a little bit easier. Take your time with it. Pull that down. Now I'm going to do the same thing as I did before. Double check that I got everything covered. So I'm going to put a little bit of head cement on this. That's going to just help secure that. Give it a couple minutes. I'll come back, take the black thread off the back there, and then I'll put it onto the front. So it's been a couple minutes here. That head cement's set up. I'm going to go ahead and trim off the black thread. I got just a straggler here. Happens sometimes. You could also get some tweezers in there and just pluck that out of there if you prefer. I'm going to take my black thread, and now I notice I'm attaching the black thread right at the base of the eye of the hook and in front of the orange thread, and now I'm working my way backwards. That's just to cover up that orange thread. Back a little ways, I can trim off the excess black thread. And now I just keep putting a little bit more on here to get that front black band. Some people like the colored bands to be a little thinner on these Carrie Stevens flies. That's up to you. Again, I'm going to make certain that I'm minimizing the number of thread wraps. I don't want to bulk this up. And when I get all of that in, I'm going to flatten my thread. This time I will use my whip finish tool. And I will put in about a 7 or 8 turn whip finish as I make my way right down to behind the eye. Lost control there. That's and that's where mistakes happen. Lost control of the bobbin right there. Things could have loosened up there. You could always, in this case, remove it and just redo it, especially since you've got everything looking just the way you want it in this fly. And that's the final thing. We can always go back and, cut that out and redo it. To make certain that everything works right, I'm going to put a little head cement on this. The same little thing before. In a couple minutes, now I also don't have to put head cement on the whole head at this stage, because I've got some on the orange, I've got some on the black there, and the black there. So in a moment, I'm just going to trim this off. And then After a few minutes, when that's dry, I will put some clear lacquer on it. The only other thing is when you are tying these also, you want to try and minimize how much you are handling the materials and squeezing and moving them in your fingers. When you actually mount the fly, however you're going to present it, then you can preen some of these out, make certain they're the way you want. Notice I have, because of this all glued together, I've got these barbs that got kind of separated, pushed apart. So I would probably have this side as the back side of the fly if this were going to be framed, or if it were going to be, on a wall somewhere or something like that. And then I would keep this side here as the front side. Again, that's up to you. But after you get it mounted, you can preen some of your materials out to present them just a little bit, so you can see the yellow throat and the yellow tail. You could potentially, if this is going to be the outside of it, also leave it like that with the body displayed just a little bit. But again, I like these long streamers to just be more right on the sides, much more horizontal. So that's all set up. I'm going to go ahead and trim away black thread. The other thing is, you'll notice that when I started this fly, I did not debarb it. Different reasons for that, mostly because this is being tied to be framed and put up somewhere. People expect to see the barb on the hook. So I generally don't, if I'm tying this for somebody else that they may fish it, or if I'm tying this to be framed and presented, I'm not going to debarb it, simply because I'll leave it up to them if they want to fish it that way. For me, myself, I would debarb it, but to be framed, some people think it looks better with that barb on there. So there you have it. So I'll come back in a little bit and put 2 coats of clear lacquer on that to help reinforce it and finish that off. That is Carrie Stevens Blue Dragon. Hope you don't mind a little bit longer video today, just showing a few nuances if you're going to tie some of these to be presented or framed, some little tips that might help you along the way. Thanks for watching today. Thank you for joining me at the Vise today. I hope you learned a new pattern, at least a tip or trick here and there. If you'd like to help Dress Irons, you can like, comment, share, subscribe, all those wonderful things for the video. You can also head out to dressedirons.com, where you can buy flies, tools, stickers, and merch, or you can join a growing community over on Locals at the Dressed Irons Fly Tying Guild. You can also donate to Dressed Irons if you want through the link at the bottom of the description. I thank everybody for their ongoing support, as it really does help the creation of these videos. But what's important is to remember, only fly tying. If you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong.